Russ has the flag, so I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Well, I hope you're all enjoying this wonderful day. It is beautiful outside, and it's the temperature is just perfect, and it is what I like to say is a nice Michigan temperature. It's not too hot, not too cold, just right, a very kind of Goldilocks sort of experience. So so happy that everybody's here. Stan is out of town, so I get to practice, so be kind, but I like feedback. I'm good with feedback. Okay, so do we have any guests today? Okay. I have a few announcements before we start our program. The Rotary cups are on the table, and please give generously. We are starting to build up our coffers again for our community service projects, and very excited to be able to start that back up again. So please, as we like to say, as Grace used to say, let's go with maybe one more than $1. If you have more, please put in more. We will be meeting in person as well on Zoom for the foreseeable future. We are working on the hybrid model, and I think we're doing pretty good. Steve is getting really good at it. Stan is getting really good at it. And we're going to break Vince in, so then he'll be all ready for it too, come July. If you have time this afternoon, we are still looking for people who would like to be part of the blood drive. And it is from 2 to 6 at the Raleigh Scout Service Center. There still are slots available. It's at 1020 Southeast Monroe. So if you are all good to go and you've had your orange juice and your sustenance and you want to give blood, I encourage you to do so. The Rotary Rubbish Roundup is scheduled for May 8th, and we'll have more details available about that. So please consider joining us for this service project, because each service project we participate in, we count those as part of our goals that we have, that we report to the district and we report to Rotary International. So I'm encouraging you all to participate if you have an opportunity. If you do service as volunteers out in the community, please share that information with Jeanette Weens, because we can count that too. And we would like to be able to recognize all of the great service that everybody's been doing in this year. We are also, because I'm getting ready for July 1st to be president, so I am beginning to look at who I need for committee members for our various committees. So please consider joining a committee. I may do a little recruiting and asking if you'd be willing to join, just so that you know some of the committees that we are looking at. We would like to have some additional people for the membership committee. Shelley is doing a wonderful job on that. She has done some recruiting, but we would like to have a few more people. Public relations, Vince has been doing a great job with media, but pretty soon he's going to be Steve and be very busy coordinating all the programs. And so we are looking at people for the public relations committee. Community service, we can always use community service members to join and to help us do that great work. And finally, we do have the Social Justice Committee, and we have a number of people who joined that, but we are always looking for more members. So please, we are people of action, Rotarians, and we would love to have you consider joining one of those committee members. Plus, we're also talking it up because maybe we can get Michael to join our club. So I'm going to welcome Joni to come up and introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon. I am thrilled to be able to introduce Michael Odupitan. I've been practicing his last name all morning, and he finally gave me a thumbs up. because I first met Michael through Zoom, and he was presenting at the Rotary South Club. And so as soon as the meeting was over, I called Steve and I says, we got to get him to talk at our club. We got to get him to talk at our club. And then I emailed him and I said, Michael, you need to consider joining the Rotary Club of Topeka. And I'm still working on it. So help me close the deal today. Michael moved from Florida to Topeka to play football and basketball at Washburn. And he loved Topeka. And he graduated in criminal justice in 2006 and continued to work in the Northeast area in criminal justice with youth and mentoring, doing adult foster care. You'll have to explain that a little bit. And so then he thought, I can do more. And he eventually ended up in Tulsa for 4 years with the Black Wall Street. And they mentored him and he learned from them to continue to work with improving diversity and working with youth to help them be successful in what they choose to do. Then last Saturday morning, I was selected to participate in Mosaic. And there was a big article about it earlier in the week. And lo and behold, who is my coach in Mosaic? It's Michael. And so I was thrilled to be able to introduce and share his accomplishments with us. And I'm looking forward to you sharing what you're doing here, Michael. So Michael Odupitan.
Thank you, Joni. Mind if I stand over there?
Trouble with that is they can't see it then, so let me try to,
Oh, I need to put that. I can put it back up here.
I got you,
You got me?
I got you.
All right. So thank you guys for having me. I really do appreciate it. This has been quite the ride for me since I've been back here in Topeka because when I left here, I felt like there was an opportunity to be able to do what I'm doing now. And people extending themselves like Ms. Johnny and offering these opportunities. So again, I want to thank you guys. So I guess, today kind of explaining what I do here. Like I said, recently, since I've been back and moving back from Tulsa and what I've been doing as far as expanding myself, I came back here on a mission to try to be a part of the diversity and inclusion and building some of that in Topeka. But also with my kind of focus in that is building minority communities, because as a young man growing up, there's a lot of things that I've missed in my life that I didn't have opportunities to be able to know the world the way I know it now. It was a very foggy one. It was one that set on a lot of false illusions of what life really was. And until I got older in life, and maybe more so after I graduated college, I started to see the world in a different light. And that's what I want to be able to give back to people and helping people find their personal growth and helping them get to their self-actualization and personal development. So I'll give you guys a little bit of background on myself. Like I said, I'm from West Palm Beach, Florida. And in Florida, I think sometimes people ask me when I'm here in Topeka, like, why don't I go back to Florida? Like, why are you here in Topeka? What's so good about Topeka? But I didn't come from the best places in Topeka. From Florida. West Palm Beach was a very rough place for me. And I tell the story all the time, and I tell people that I feel like Topeka kind of saved my life a little bit, because if I would have stayed where I was at, I would have been living in what a lot of people consider the Black man's burden, which is you're going to either end up dead or in jail. Predominantly, most of my friends that I grew up with ended up in that situation. They ended up dead or they ended up in jail. And I say all the time that I'm neither one of those things today. So I'm thankful for Topeka for that. But as I transitioned into my adult life and after high school, I had an opportunity to go to college. Just because I was a standout athlete in school, football and basketball, and I had an opportunity to go to Marshall University. But when I got to Marshall, and then it came down to the time for me to get ready to leave, because of the false illusions that I was living in at the time, I didn't have the academic status to be able to get into Marshall. My SAT scores didn't match up with my grades. So I missed that opportunity. So they gave me an option of a Proposition 44 where they said, if you come your first year, we'll pay for it. Well, again, the lack of knowledge said I didn't know anything about student loans. So I passed up on an opportunity. So I ended up going to Southern Illinois. And when I got to Southern Illinois, it was during the winter. It was the coldest thing I ever experienced. Being a kid from West Palm Beach, Florida, I was like, Coach, I can't do this. Please send me back home. So they did. And I ended up going back home. And when I was there, the reality started to sit in as me being a young adult, like, okay, what are you going to do with your life? You have to go do something different. When I started to watch everything that was going on around me, the drugs, the killing, the things of that nature. So I had a best friend that was growing up with me, and we always said that, our primary goal was to get out of Florida. It's one of those things that people always say, in the minority community is that you have to get out. And I feel like that's a problem, because again, if everybody is getting out, for those who have the information to grow, then they're not feeding back into their communities. So then that way the communities aren't growing the way that they should, because you don't have the mentors, you don't have the people that have been through the experiences to be able to feed that back into the community. So, but I ended up getting out, and I was talking to my coach, Kiel, who was at Southern Illinois, and he told me that he had a coach that was coming to Washburn from Pitt State, and that coach's name was Craig Shurig. And Coach Craig Shurig gave me a call and told me that he had some openings for me, and if I was open to come to Kansas, that he had a scholarship for me. And the first thing I asked Coach was, where's Kansas? Where's that located on the map? So I had a couple of friends of mine, Coach Shurig reached out to a couple of us, and we all decided to come together. No one wanted to come by themselves because, again, being some kids from West Palm Beach, we didn't know much about our geography and where Kansas was. So got here in 2002, and it was quite the ride, to be honest with you. It was the first time that I really experienced what I would consider a culture shock, because in Florida, it was a very diverse community, very diverse city. You have all types of nationalities, from food to culture, you name it. But when I got here at Washburn, it was very few minorities on campus. And then I learned a thing by being at Washburn, where there was not a lot of diversity. And I mean diversity in the sense of learning about other people. So we struggled, the few of us that came here. And one of the things we struggled with was getting along with other people. We looked a little rough at the time. I used to have dreadlocks that was down here. And that was a lot different for a lot of people. But we figured out that we had to do something. And I say this has been one of my biggest learning experiences. We went door to door to every dorm room to introduce ourselves to the kids that was on campus. And I learned something at that point. The thing that I learned was that sometimes people just don't know who you are or what you've been through. And when I met a lot of those kids that was on the campus, a lot of those kids were maybe even transplants from outside of Topeka, living in smaller cities like, Western Kansas and things like that, where they grew up in communities where there were not a lot of African-Americans, a lot of diversity. So it wasn't that we was carrying on our hearts what we felt like was racism. It was just a lack of knowing. So at that point, getting into my career and working in different things, my background is in criminal justice, but I worked 17 years in the social work field. And I applied that to every asset of, working in that field and working with different people and learning about different individuals and how we can collaborate and work together. As Joni stated, I was a foster parent for 8 years for intensive boys, taking the roughest of the rough. I've done everything from criminal justice to working in juvenile detention to working in the jail, working in foster care agencies, and also working in mental health hospitals like Vallejo and K&I. So over the time of my years here, from 2002 to 2015, I wasn't living in much of a purpose. I didn't really have any direction. I was just, going through the motions. But as I was going through the motions, I was reaching heights in my life that I never thought I would be able to achieve. At some point in my life, I had, a 5-bedroom house that I was living in with my kids, and I had 2 cars at the time, which, growing up, my mom barely had a car that worked. So in that point of hitting some of what I feel like my ceiling, of growth. And I was looking for other individuals to connect with, to expand with, to, build upon with. Those things wasn't available for me. So in 2015, I moved to Kansas City. When I got to Kansas City, I was looking forward to getting back to a bigger city, and maybe there would be some different opportunities. But when I got to Kansas City, I realized that Kansas City was a little different than Topeka. It was very hard to make a connection with people in Kansas City. I felt like there was a difficult disconnect there, maybe more so because it was the city and I was getting used to Topeka and how things was moving here. But 6 months after I was there, in 2015, I lost my mom to cancer. And that was probably the hardest thing I've ever been through, because my mom was all that I had. I didn't grow up with my father like most African-American males or African-American children. We don't grow up with our fathers. So when I lost my mom, it was an awakening for me, to be honest with you guys. It was the point in my life where I realized that I needed to do something greater because of who my mom was. And then when she passed away, I started to really take a look at myself and who I am and what I was developing into. And then in that point at the funeral, I was listening to the stories that the people were saying about my mom and who she was. And it wasn't really adding up to me for what they saw her as versus what I saw her as. My mom was someone who always gave to the community in the best way she could. So when I thought about it, I said, well, I'm her youngest child. And then with me being her youngest, I'm her legacy. And what I do from this point in my life carries on through her. So in my life, I wanted to start working on a legacy. So 6 years ago, after she passed, I started to work on a group called Community Connection. It was basically about just getting people to the point of connecting with each other. But then we start running into the situations, what we're kind of seeing today with the George Floyd and the Dante situation in Minnesota. We had the Eric Gardners and other situations of that nature. And, when I was watching what was going on, I noticed that there were a lot of rioting in the streets, a lot of protests, but I always felt like, those things are great. But I always said, how do those things really improve our communities? At what point do we see a change in our communities from those things? Yeah, we shoot for a policy change, but are our communities getting better? When do we take responsibility for what happens in our communities? And I feel like that's the responsibility of the people, right? When we think about, Martin Luther King and his goal and what he had going in, it was more so of a people's campaign, right? So I wanted to do something to get people together and start building in the community. And I started to dive into the history of myself and great leaders that we had in our history that as an African-American man, I never had the privilege to get to learn who these people were through school. And I'm meaning people like Marcus Garvey, Stokely Carmichael, Fred Hampton. You talk about these great leaders in our community that a lot of people don't know anything about. And then as I was diving into that history, I found Black Wall Street. And then that was another thing. I never heard about this prominent, African-American community, probably one of the most prominent communities that we've had in this country and the history of it. So I had a job opportunity to move to Tulsa. Now it was a no-brainer for me. So I just had to go. So when I got down to Tulsa and start learning about what Black Wall Street was and how it was created and how it, a minority community was able to thrive, I started thinking about Topeka. And I started thinking about, when I was here and how people were growing and succeeding in this city as far as the minorities, and then what did that look like as far as the diversity in this city. So I wanted to be a part of doing something different and bringing that back to Topeka. So I had an opportunity to come visit a few of my friends, and I told them about the ideal of what I thought we should do here, and that came the spawn of the nonprofit organization that we started here called Omni Cercle Group. And Omni Cercle was just basically the ideal was for us to take responsibility for our communities and do as much as we can when we can to give people the opportunity to grow into their true self. Because we look at it from a bottom-up approach to improving communities. If people are living in what we consider suffering all day, every day, it's really hard for you to get to a next level in your life. If you're worrying about how you're going to eat tomorrow, if you're worrying about how you're going to have shelter over your head, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we just started the program with doing as much as we can, food programs, toys for kids, cleanup projects if we could, connecting with people in the community any way we could. And that's where it started. And had an opportunity to, at that point, George Floyd hit, and right before COVID, and had an opportunity to meet Ms. Karen at the downtown, and I had a speaking engagement there, and I was able to speak at one of the rallies, and I just said what was on my heart. And I noticed that the city was really receptive to what we had to say. So we said, okay, well, let's make this into a real thing. So we, in 2019, we made the business an official nonprofit by registering the business, and it's been growing. So the goal was really to get minorities in a place where they can want to be a part of the growth of the city. I think it's a lot of things that happen around in communities that minorities know nothing about because they're not getting engaged. And we wanted to be able to create a safe space for minorities to get engaged, while also building a space where individuals can be a part of the growth and collaborate with other individuals that don't look like them, based off everything that I've been through, right? So Omni Circle's mission is to unite and strengthen communities by adding value to the personal and professional development of our members. So what we say in that is we want to help people get to their self-actualization. And our vision is to be a part of to be a sub goal to the greater goal of Topeka. I feel like Topeka, the city doesn't get better unless everybody gets better together. And if we have one subgroup of individuals growing and another subgroup not growing, then our city is not doing what it's supposed to do. So in order to reach individuals in our community and build some of that diversity and inclusion in the city, we want to do our part with getting minority individuals to a place where we can get to a place where we can diverse and be inclusive with other people. So we have been doing that so far in our organization by building and helping people grow and building connections and collaborating with other individuals so we can create in the city together so we can be the great city that we know we can be. So that's really just kind of the mission that we've been on, really trying to do as much as we can. We have stepped into another phase of our organization. So it's kind of like, I'm sure probably a lot of you guys probably read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. When you think about, they go from dependent, independent to interdependency. Our goal with the nonprofit was to help the dependent people and get them to a place where they can be independent. So our next phase is as we got some members of our organization who are in the independent state, but are giving back to those who are dependent. We said, how do we help those individuals? How do we help them grow? Where is the next step for these individuals? So, from a tally from our organization, we started now in our next phase is starting a co-working space for the personal development of those who are ready to grow, whether that be career or start a business. So now what we're doing in this next space, we just purchased a 15,000 square foot building right off of Topeka Boulevard and 13th Street. And we're trying to get this building up so we can do the things that we want to be able to do while also being diverse and inclusive. So like working, for example, with Ms. Karen and the Mosaic Partner Pairs. And this is something that we can start to expand into the community as far as what does diversity look like? We can start being in a space where we can have those conversations when, people might not know how to engage with other individuals, but we can house that conversation. We can have a space where we can grow. So we really want to be in a space where, like I said, the diversity is important, that the inclusion is important, but also at the same time, sharing of the resources so we can get to that place. Because sometimes I would say for myself, it wasn't to the point where I was able to have the awakening to what life really is about. And I was living in a false illusion. So I think we want to get people out of that illusion, but we need help, right? We need the help from people of the community to start to provide their resources. When we look around the landscape of the land, we can say that there are a ton of jobs out here and businesses. When you say, are those businesses diverse and inclusive? Do we have people from the minority community doing plumbing? Do we have people doing construction, marketing? And we'll say, well, we'll put those jobs out, but they're not taking those jobs. Well, it's because a lot of the minorities just don't know how to step into that world. We want to provide that education so they can provide those opportunities to step into those jobs and then be a part of the growth. Because myself, working at Hills and different places in Topeka, whenever you see any minority that is in a high paying position here, they're typically not from Topeka. And then typically those individuals don't live in Topeka. So if we're talking about community pride and growing people in this city and helping them get to a better place, we have to get the people that live in this city to a better place first. So that's what we want to be able to do. So we're working to build that here in Topeka and looking for as much help that we can get as far as education in the community and any resources that will help us get there. So that is who I am. That is what we're doing. And like I said, any resources or help that we can get to help us get this building open or, just be a part of the education for the community. I think it would be really great. So I want to thank you guys for having me. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but yeah, I'm open to any questions if anybody has any. And that's who I am pretty much. Yes.
I'm curious about how you are considering identifying people who might be helped by your group. Would you go knock on doors, or do you put out flyers, or how do you plan to do that, or how are you doing it?
Yeah, so the statistics of the community shows, right? When we look at when we look at education across the board for certain areas of communities, right? When we look at who's going to college, who's not going to college, and what areas that they reside in. What areas are financially struggling when you look at the maps as far as economic wealth in the communities. These are the areas that we want to target. These are areas that we have been targeting as far as helping individuals that are dependent, right? But as our community has been growing, I think the individuals that see that they want to give back to the community, they just don't have a place to do it. It's been more of a place where we say, just spread the word. We all do our own recruiting. I'm sure you guys do the same. As we say, somebody join a group, we just say, tell one other person. If you tell one other person, that they're going to tell somebody else, and then we'll grow that way. So it's really been a lot of word of mouth and growing our organization. But really, when we look at the statistics of the communities that are struggling, when they show up red on the map, those are the ones that we want to give our attention to so we can help grow those communities as well.
Is your organization involved also in diversity education? Speaking like you do now, some of your experiences and how that then develop other communities?
Yes, so we're working right now as we grow our organization. There are some different programs that we're trying to step into, and one of the programs that we always talk about is history and how important it is. And I think, as I mentioned, some of those people in the community that that we've had great leaders that no one ever knows about, right? Not even just African Americans, but other people as well. And we can talk about the timelines of the successes of people. I always say, I feel like history teaches people compassion for other individuals when you know what a person has been through. And as we go through the history timeline, so many times that as African Americans, we only hear the side of us that are slavery and what we've been through and how much pain that was in, what we've been through as African Americans in this country. But there is some powerful things that, I think if more people understood the growth of the minorities and the contributions that minorities have built to this country, I think that would look a little different as far as that diversity in education and how do we get to a different place of learning about each other, because again, as a minority male myself, when I went through school, it was learning about everything about America in the sense of a certain lens, right? But then we expand that lens so everybody is inclusive and we're learning about different people and how they contributed to this country. So I think we're definitely getting to that place where we can offer those diversity courses, but we're still building some of these programs in our business. Go ahead.
One of the areas where I see a problem with diversity in Topeka and Shawnee County is in our law enforcement.
Hmm.
I'm wondering if there are ways that you can, I have worked with ministerial group in working with our police department, and they have accepted the reality that diversity is a problem and would like to work on that and fix it. It's been a problem. I didn't know if you've had any opportunity to look into that and maybe help us.
Yeah, so we've there's a number of things that we do. So I didn't talk about more so some of our pillars. So like I said, our pillars of our growth are the personal development which is in our nonprofit, and then the professional development, which is in our for-profit. We have a mentorship program that we're working on, and then we also have a little bit of a program where we focus on the politics in our community, and that's a program called AVA. Stands for African American Women's Voting Alliance. It really just started for a place to educate the community on, you know, when we were having the election and then just educating people on politics. But what that has grown into is a bigger thing as we've gotten more in the community. So as we talk about, you know, what's going on with, you know, the different things that we were dealing with, you know, George Floyd and different stuff like that. I had an opportunity to speak with Chief Cochran, and we talked about that diversity and what would that look like. And one of the things that they told me was that, you know, they are looking for, like many other jobs in the city, they are looking to be diverse. But the problem that they were running into is that a lot of the African Americans that they tried to get into the business or into that career couldn't pass the math portions of the test in order to get those jobs. So it's very hard for getting individuals. Now we can say, is that the truth, or, you know, are we not getting to the place where we're providing proper education to help those kids get those jobs? But I'm hearing that math is a problem across the board. So just last night we had an educational course as far as building an agenda for helping minorities in the community. And this is one of the topics that came up. You know, are we providing the proper education to help people step into the careers that they need to step into? Does the statistics show that? Are we failing, or are we advancing? And right now the statistics say that we are failing. So again, at what point do we start to take the responsibility to say that these things are affecting the community? This is why people aren't getting these jobs. And then what do we do to improve that so that we can get people into the position that they need to go? So I think that if we don't know that these things are happening, right? We don't know that they're not passing the test, and we just think, well, they're not being diverse because no one is taking those jobs. Well, we have to find what the root is. And the root is that, you know, right now we need to do a better job in our educational system.
This is going to Du Bois.
Go ahead.
And I guess this is a follow-up to that. In reference to McCullough's comment, a response that we've received, because that is something the group that he's referring to is Mainstream Voices of Faith. And we had specific recommendations as it relates to recruitment. And some of the responses that we've had were some efforts from the chief to actually make more efforts in hiring, looking for people of color and going to different schools to recruit for recruitment. So the math did not come up in those discussions that we had as a barrier. But if that's something that you're finding out that is a barrier, I would think that then we would work together to address that, if that makes sense.
I didn't get the full question. Anybody catch it?
I didn't.
She was saying that they're finding that when they talked to the chief, they talked about other things and didn't talk about math. So maybe need to work together to combine the conversations.
Right, and I think that's
Say recruiting at African American Black colleges and universities. I think
Well, I think, I mean, me and Ms. Du Bois have talked a few times, but I think as we talked about, I didn't catch everything, Ms. Du Bois, so I do apologize. But I think if I caught the gist of it is how do we collaborate to get these things done? But I think there is a point where I think we talk to community, right? And we have people across the board, not just in the minority community, but other communities as well. How do we then say, if this is an issue, how do we then collaborate to get a focus on improving it, right? And I think that's where Omni kind of steps in for me, to open the door to have the conversation and say, this is what we're struggling with, right? Whether that be math, whether that be some other issue that may be affecting the community, but what are we going to do? And that's what we always talk about. It's not just us taking responsibility, it's everybody collaboratively working together to address the issue. So if it is an issue that we're seeing in the community, then we say, well, how do we then collaborate? Who's willing to collaborate with us to get the job done so we can see the improvement. You know, I think one of the things that we don't see enough of, we have a young man that is a part of our group, and he just became a police officer. And he talked to me about some of the things that he had to go through to become, you know, that officer. And I think as we can get more familiar with what the struggles are, and we can talk about those struggles and how do we get to that next, you know, over that fence or whatever, to get us more acclimated into these jobs across the board, not just as a police officer, we can start to see some things happen different. But this is where the collaboration comes in, what we're looking for the city to say, we know what the issues are. Who's willing to help us improve the issues together? Go ahead.
The leading question here, because it's been fun for me at a distance, really, to see your organization grow. Could you talk about how many people are involved in the organization now, and kind of maybe how it's evolved a little bit? And some of the first pictures I remember were actually just standing with people outside on the steps of the church or some sort of building, visiting informally. And I know it has moved since then. But if you could give an idea of the diversity internally of that group and the scope and how many people, how it's changed even the last couple of years.
Yeah, so we started, like I said, in 2019, and like I said, really just being in a space where we wanted to work together collaboratively. So we have seen, like I said, it was just really getting in the community, to be honest with you. We just wanted to see change and find a way that we can collaborate together. And then I think, you know, we started February of 2019. George Floyd happened after that, right? COVID happened after that. So when, you know, us being in the community and just being a part of the change and helping in the best way we possibly could, when George Floyd hit, you know, I think there was some different form of emotions that came out of that situation. And, you know, a lot of people were looking for a place to, you know, maybe deal with the pain. And I think as an organization, as we were growing, we gave a lot of people a safe space to be able to address some of those issues, to talk about it, so that way they can kind of deal with it. And I think that's what we offered. So then a lot of people asked us during the time of COVID, like, how did it affect the business? Well, we actually say that with George Floyd and everything like that, it actually helped us improve, because a lot of people was looking for a place to feel better about what was going on in the country and having those conversations. So we started out really in a space where we said, how do we give African Americans, due to everything that is going on, a space to be comfortable? You know, right now you have different organizations, different places across the city, and they're not as diverse as they might want to be. But at the same time, we may say, well, why are these, you know, minorities are not getting involved, or why are these things like that? Because a lot of minorities don't feel like, to be honest with you, that a lot of those spaces are for them, you know? So we say, well, okay, well, if you're not going to get involved in that, well, what would you get involved in? Well, I will get involved in something that looks a lot like me, you know, something that I can feel comfortable in. So we say, okay, well, we'll give you that space, you know, and that's where some of the change of the program started to happen. We start to give a safe space for people to have the conversation, a safe space for people to talk about it the way they want to talk about it, without feeling like I'm going to offend anybody, because I'm going to talk about my raw emotions that, you know, that may be tough for a lot of people to deal with. So we had those spaces and we talked about those things, and a lot of people started to join our organization because that felt good, right? But we always said that at some point, as we build our organization, we want to be a part of the bigger picture. So then now we say, okay, well, if you're having those struggles, let's talk about it. Let's get you out of that pain. You know what I mean? Because if you're living in the pain, it's hard to transition into something greater. So we got to get people out of that pain. And we've been working on some of that stuff in our group and addressing some of those issues. But now it's like I said, the transition of where we want to go, I think we need more conversations from people that don't look like us as well. You know, for people to say, okay, I've had a lot of conversations over the last year of, you know, our counterparts of people that say, I don't know enough about Black people. You know, I want to know more about, you know, your struggles. I want to know more about what's going on in the world that you see, because sometimes we live in the same world, but it can look very different based off our perceptions and what we go through, right? So I think we want to be able to get more to a space where we can say, this is how we're going to transition into having more real conversations about building the city. So as you asked how many members, right now our members have fluctuated depending on what was going on with COVID, jobs, security, different things like that. So we've been maintaining about 50 members right now. And I think that since things are starting to open back up, we're starting to see it grow, getting more people getting involved in what we're doing. And I think as we open the door more to what we're building, I think it's going to continue to grow. We've been really just kind of keeping it in-house to some degree. But now that we've opened it up and we're letting people know about what we're doing and how we want to collaborate with the city, I can definitely see it changing in the next year or so.
Talk a little bit about funding, and what some of your sources are for funding, and then also, as you continue to grow, what can we provide kind of on a larger scale, and volunteers, is it networking?
Mhm. So funding wise, so funding has been interesting because I say it's another one of those things that we talk about minority businesses that we don't know enough about. And when I started this organization, I literally worked 2 jobs. I worked Hill Pet Nutrition from 8 to 5. And then I drove to Kansas City at 7:30 to be at my next job from 8:30 to 6:30 in the morning. And I did that 4 days a week just to fund the program. So we did what we had to do to make sure that we did our best for the community and provide in the best way we wanted to. So as a nonprofit organization, to be honest with you guys, we haven't received $1 from any grant from anybody. We've done it all ourselves through our membership. So that has been somewhat of a struggle, you know. I think we can do better, but I think some things are a transition in learning, right? We don't have people that are in this field. You know, we don't have enough people. I'm not gonna say we don't have any that are grant writers, right? We need the access to people that can say, hey, I can help you write these grants so I can give you the education to do it the right way so you can get the funding, right? We need the resources to be able to just come in and offer information on, you know, whether it be, you know, as we know that there's grants that people give out in different organizations. Well, how do we get in line for those grants? You know what I mean? So that we can provide the information to the next person so they can get it, you know? These opportunities where I talk about, you know, that collaboration piece of people in the community is what we need. And I'm just speaking from, you know, our group and what we're seeing and what they struggle with and what we struggle with. So providing those resources, helping in that aspect, helping us get to the next level, whether that be education, whether that be resources, whether that be donations, whatever funding that we can get so we can become the organization that we truly want to be in the city. But it's going to help. We're going to need help to do it, you know, because not to say that we're naive and we can't learn, but I think that, you know, as a system, which is what we want to develop a system so that way other individuals can learn from the system, that we can develop a pipeline so we don't have to continue to scrounge and try to find this information. You have a place where you can get it and you can learn it and you can maybe grow your own business. But now we have a system that we can just help you with it along the way until it becomes a norm. So that's what we're really working on. And if anybody that has the resources that can help us in those things, it's all, it could all be helpful.
Michael, that was amazing. Thank you so very much. I wrote down a number of things that the library can do and that Rotary can do to nurture that and build that relationship. So our next week's presentation will be our own Karen Hiller, and she's going to talk about Topeka United. So I'm very excited about that. So let's stand up for the 4-way test. Oh, yes. Before we do that, if you haven't had a chance, we have the election thing to decide if you want to prepay or pay as you go for your meals. You know, we started that last year and then COVID. And so now we have another time where we're back up for it. So there's papers there. We can email them out, but if you fill it out here, we already get it. They will be due on the 15th of May. And then we will start again for July. So here we go. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Will it be fun? And is it kind? Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.